Hey guys, I haven't been dead. I'm still alive. It's just very pissed off at YouTube right now. I'm above and beyond pissed off. Especially because every time I go to upload a video that's longer than 15 minutes, it will not let me. It rejects it. And then I have to delete the new videos so that I can upload something longer than 15 minutes, but it gets rejected and the process repeats. So nothing is copyright. I have no copyright thing filed against me, anything. YouTube is just not fixing this glitch, and every video that I have is over 15 minutes, so this one is going to be less than 15 minutes. And basically, I'm just showing me working on the inside of my GR16 Blowback from G&G, and I took about 4 hours because the inside's a little bit not the exact size you need. It's like just barely proper. What you're going to find out though is I clean everything, get rid of the old grease, and then I'm going to put on my own white grease, which is a lot better, of course. So I'm in the process of cleaning everything first. And then I remove everything out, all the bushings, and then I start doing shimming. Now I'm going to tell you guys a few tricks for yourself if you're ever doing anything on a gearbox. Number one is shimming, I would say. It's, I think, a skill at the same time with experience. Of course, I haven't done so many that I'm so experienced with it, but I can tell you from my common sense, I know what should be and not should be. And I'm finding that these G&Gs are getting to be a pain in the ass because when I open them up, they're grinding. The sector gear, which is the one next to the piston, is grinding on the cutoff lever. And that's when you switch to semi and automatic that decides if it's going to be semi or automatic, and sometimes safety or not, depending on the spring of the selector switch. So what's going on? I am actually taking the look on the inside. Now this was a new gun that I had not really decided to open until today. I just said, you know what, the heck with it. I'm going to start opening all my G&G guns, and this one took the longest because it has the blowback, which was a pain to kind of pull off, but at the same time it was the shimming job just took so long. It was not that difficult. Everything that I've done up to this point has been pretty easy on all the gearboxes. I've been in 4 different ones this last week. I've recorded most of everything except for, again, I can't post my videos, so I'm getting pretty pissed off with YouTube. So what I'm doing here, putting some grease on everything that moves for the most part. I also changed the pistons, O-ring. It was terrible. It was so messed up. There was no compression with this GR16 blowback carbine. So, or just the gearbox is basically a GR16. That's all you need to know with a blowback. Because who cares about the gun? You can put the gearbox in any gun, right? Anyways, motor's in good shape. Everything else is in good shape. Just when you get down into the gearbox, there's that issue. Also, the anti-reversal latch rubs a little bit on the, I'm trying to remember what gear that's called. The second gear. It's the one between the bevel and the sector gear. I don't remember what the name is. Anyways, you've got the anti-reversal latch rubbing against it a little bit, and I would file these things down and make them perfect, but I told you it took me 4 hours to already make it pretty dang close to perfect. I mean, I was not 100% satisfied, but I was about 90, up there, 90% plus satisfied. I was like, okay, I did a pretty good job. So basically now when you go buy your GR16 G&G gun, your semi and auto selector switch sometimes doesn't work properly. It's because it's touching that sector gear and it rubs up against it and it can't make the full contact. And to usually get away with this, you usually switch back to safe and then semi and then automatic. Well, I decided to just go ahead and fix it. And I did fix it, of course. I tried multiple times to try to get the malfunction to come back, and it doesn't come back. It's because I shimmed it way above the cutoff lever. And then at the same time, I also shimmed everything to fit that, because you have to. You can't just shim one gear higher. You also have to make sure it fits to the piston. So it causes all these problems. But here's how you basically work on your shimming and become really good at it. You start at the very first gear, which is the one in the middle, the second one. I forget the name. You put your bushings, you remove all your bushings first, then you put down one bushing at that location. You can grease it at that point if you need to. I usually don't grease everything till I know at the end that what's perfect or what's not. But you'll see me pretty soon. I'll be putting that second gear up there. And what happens is you start out with a shim on the bottom of it, because if your gear doesn't have a shim at all, it's rubbing on the bushing or the bearing, whichever ones you're using. And it's not that gear is not very high at all. Usually I don't see any bushings that push it up. Here's the gear that I'm talking about. So if it's not being pushed up, what happens is it rubs right against the gearbox. So it's rubbing in the bushing or bearing and the gearbox, and you basically have this grease circle that inside the gearbox that looks like crap. It just lets you know that it's not running as free-flowing as it should be. So what you need to do is put a shim or two to push it upwards from this location, and you can spin with your hand to see how well it spins. But at the same time, you need to put shims on top, depending on if it can move up or down while the gearbox is closed. So a good practice to make your shimming really good. Start at one gear at a time and then start connecting them like a puzzle until you've got it perfectly shimmed the way you want. Once you've got it perfectly shimmed, you don't need to shim it over again. I mean, you've got it shimmed perfectly. If you ever open up the gearboxes, check out some gears, you might have to shim at that point, but everything else you're just never gonna have to shim, and it'll be easy to put it back together. Why they make you shim parts individually, I'm not really sure. That's, at least they give you the option to fix things when other people don't, like G&G. Thank you for not fixing this. Just manufacture them all the same like this. Anyways, so you can see I'm going to be putting the bushing / bearing in this other side of the gearbox shell, and I'm going to flip it over. Now the thing about this one, my other G&G combat machine, the bushing does not fall out. It does not get stuck in there. It's like in between. I like that because it gives you an easier ability to see how well you're shimming. When it's stuck in the shell, it's kind of hard to tell because you have to use a tool to push the gear up to see if there's any space. And if, let's say it's the gear that I'm talking about right now, it's kind of hard to see if it's moving. I mean, you can look at the bushing and see if there's any movement. But usually the best way I found from experience so far is pushing down the bushing or bearing and seeing if it moves downward. If it moves downward, you need another shim on the top. And you repeat this until it doesn't move, by which you remove one. If you keep it where it doesn't move, sure, that's almost perfect. The fact is, though, it may be just a little too tight, and you won't know until you close it up. And then when you close it up, you're going to be really upset because it's just going to start making a grinding noise, and it's going to eat the bushing, basically, or the bearing. It's going to shatter it. So you can't have it too tight. I also did all this work for my Aries G36C. I shimmed the whole thing, which took me, I think it was an hour to get the gearbox open and closed. I mean, that's how fast I did it. This took me 4 hours for this thing. Simply because there was a lot of other components. The blowback and everything else was a lot more components than the Aries is. The Aries G36 is just a really good gearbox to work on. I probably, if I had to work on it again, I'd be like 15 minutes in and out, or even less than that, because I've already shimmed it perfectly. So, but also it depends on how fast you are, the speed and everything. And I just go like okay speed. Now I'm hitting all the bushing and bearings in place, trying to keep them compact in there. That way, see, the bushing and bearings are supposed to move a little bit. When they have that little bit of movement, the gears are not like grinding up against them. they have just a tad bit of movement. You're supposed to make them almost have no movement, so only the gears are moving. But from what I found, like I said, if you put too many shims, you're going to be kicking yourself in the ass. That's just going to come down to it. And the most, let's say, exciting part, maybe, because I'm being sarcastic, is shimming all the gears together. Once you get one, you work on the next, and you watch each gear to see how they move. And when you get towards the end, you put your hand in the gearbox. Only put the gears together, guys. Only the gears and the shims with the bushings. So once you put all that stuff together, only close it up every time and push with your finger on one of the gears to see how well it moves. If it doesn't move very well, that tells you you're doing a horrible job. It should be moving for the most part pretty smooth. If you've got something like an anti-reversal latch like this gearbox did, it kind of locks down the first bevel gear, and it makes it difficult to move so smoothly. It will still move okay, but it doesn't move so smoothly because, like I said, it rubs up against the gear that I cannot remember the name of. But I have this little tool too. It's a little nail punch out. It's very tiny on the end of it. It's not like an ice pick. It's not sharp. But with that tool, you're able to pull the gears and the anti-reversal latch right into the bushings or the holes of the gearbox shell, and it makes it perfect. So if they don't match up when you try to close it, it's a pain in the ass if you don't have that tool. Trust me. Having the available tools makes it so much easier. I couldn't believe, having grease and everything, putting it on all the parts and so forth. The gearbox actually opens and closes very easily by yourself. It gets to be a very easiest process. I actually enjoy working on these things. I find it very enjoyable. Other than the shimming, I don't really care too much for it because it's just so much time wasted. But once you get it perfect, your gun's going to be working for quite a long time because you got a perfect shim job. So you don't want too tight, but at the same time you don't want too loose. So basically you want to get right between there. I always go till it's very tight, and then it doesn't. You can tell that it's at the end. Then take one shim off, and that's what I run it at, so that when it shoots, it'll still have a tad bit of movement, and that would be perfect. You do not want it so tight that it's almost perfect where it doesn't have any movement, because what happens is the gears have to really work to, or the motor does have to work on those gears to make them move. So you want at least maybe that 0.1 or 0.2 millimeters of movement that allows so it doesn't grind so well. Usually you find this kind of grinding if you look down at the bushing. You'll see the cut up of it. I found one bushing on this gearbox shell that was kind of damaged. I don't know why it was damaged the way it was, but it's still usable. It was damaged on the outside, like if someone had hit it with a hammer or something. I don't know what the heck, but I just put it right back in there because I have 6 millimeter bushings replacements that I could put in there, but I'm just going to keep them for a rainy day. You never know. The parts still work fine. Why should I replace them completely? It's not going to make really any difference. People think the bushings, they're going to make my speed go twice as fast. It's not really. No, it's not really. So you can see right there, I'm just pulling the gear, seeing. Now you can always test with the shims. Like I said, you have to be careful because the anti-reversal latch can't really shim up. Depending on the gearbox, these ones for the G&G definitely cannot shim up the anti-reversal latch, because if you do, it grinds right into that second gear, the black one that's on the table right there. Simply because it grinds right next to it. I don't know why they put it right next to it. You just make the latch a little longer, put it at a different location. There's plenty of room. Or you pre-shim them all perfect, and then you just drop them in the gearbox. Duh. Not made that way. I don't know why. All these people copy each other, I guess. Anyways, I'm mad at YouTube. I'll catch you guys later.